In today's video, I'm taking you through 20 Dollar Tree DIYs I've made this year. These are all simple, budget-friendly projects anyone can try, no fancy tools needed. So let's get started. Dollar Tree sells these really nice wooden slices in different sizes and shapes, and for this project, I'll be using a couple of their rectangular one. Now, I did make sure that they were similar in size because we'll be making a cute little planter box with them. I'll also be using a couple of these square mini wooden pallets, also from Dollar Tree. First, I need to remove the jute hanger and the staples. The staples are pretty secure, so I'm using my pliers to pull out the string and a staple remover to pull the staples out. It's really attached in there, so if you don't want to deal with it, you can always just leave the staples in place. I'm going to apply some antique wax over the wooden slices to give them a nice warm look. I'm using a damp cloth to apply the wax. I want the wax to go on very lightly, so using a damp cloth helps to spread it out without making it too dark or overpowering. Now you can leave it as is for a natural rustic finish, or if you prefer, you can also paint it for a completely different look. Now for the mini wooden square palettes, I'm going to use this beautiful celery green chalk paint from Waverly. It's a soft, fresh color that adds a pop of brightness without being too overpowering. I love how chalk paint gives a smooth, matte finish, and it looks really pretty on these little wooden pieces. Now there are some hard to reach areas inside the palettes, and so I had to use a smaller brush to really get into those spots. Once everything is dried, I'm going to glue them together. So I'm just applying some wood glue on the sides of the palettes, and I'm applying it on both of them. And then I stand up one of the slices and attach the palettes on the edges. And then I attach the remaining wooden slice to form a rectangle. To make the base, I'll be using a couple small square dowels and 3 giant craft sticks. So to match, I'm applying some of that antique wax on the craft sticks. And then I'm painting the square dowels with that same celery chalk paint. Okay, once that's dry, I'm applying some wood glue on the inside bottom of the square palettes, and then I'm just attaching the dowel to that, and I'm making sure that the bottom is flush. Then I just do the same thing on the opposite side, applying glue on the palette where the dowel is going to be attached. So these dowels are what's going to hold up the craft stick base. After that, I just apply some glue on the dowels or the ends of the craft sticks, and I place that down to create the base. And I'm using 3 craft sticks, spreading them out equally. Now I was going to end here, it's so perfect just like that, but then I thought it would look really beautiful with some decorative stenciling, at least on one side. It was such a nice blank canvas. And so I got this stencil 3-pack from Walmart. This was just under $3. The stencils are beautiful and the birds on the branches are so charming. I wanted to add one of those designs. I'll be using black chalk paint, but you can also add some different colors there. Maybe black and white for the feathers on the bird, a dark brown on the branches, and some green on the leaves. So that's another option. So I'm applying the black chalk paint over the stencil, making sure to dab out as much excess paint as I can. I'm gently tapping it over the stencil, working it in light layers to get a smooth, even coverage. This way I avoid any smudging and keep the design edges nice and crisp. Once I'm done with that, I carefully remove the stencil before it dries completely, and this one is all done. It's such a simple yet beautiful project, and I love how it turned out. You can add some flowers, succulents, or candles, or even use it as a little organizer for your favorite things. For this project, I'm using one of these round glass plate candle holders from Dollar Tree. It has such a beautiful texture. I'm making a little wooden base for it just to add some warmth, so I grabbed a couple of these wood planks from Dollar Tree. I want the planks to form a cross shape underneath, and I want it to fit perfectly. So I go ahead and measure, mark, and trim the pieces down to the following size, and I just use a miter box and saw to cut it. Now all I have to do is glue them together, and so I'm just marking the center of the longer wood, and that's where I'm going to glue the 2 smaller pieces, one on each side. I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick glue. I love this glue, it's really thick and it also dries pretty fast. Now I decided to add a little extra detail by gluing some wood pieces onto the ends of the base. These pieces are actually from those mini pallets from Dollar Tree that I had already pulled apart. These were 2 slats and I just trimmed each one in half to make 4 smaller pieces. Then I just glued the pieces vertically onto the ends of the wood base. It didn't take much effort at all, but that little touch of wood on the ends really took it up a notch. It just makes the whole thing look so much more finished and put together. So at first I thought I was going to stain it, and that was the plan, but once I had it all put together, I really loved how the natural wood looked. I'm just going to spray it with a sealer and leave it natural, but let me know in the comments below, would you leave it natural or paint it a different color? So I just dropped a glass candle dish right on top, and this one is all done. I love crafting with Dollar Tree's bamboo cutting boards. They're made of real bamboo and have such a nice smooth finish, which makes them perfect for all kinds of DIY decor. So when I saw that my store finally had the new larger size in stock, I was so excited, and of course I grabbed a bunch. For the first DIY, I'll be using one bamboo cutting board, and I just love that there's more room to work with. I'll also be using one of these mini wood pallets from Dollar Tree. Now I got this vintage floral rub-on transfer from Amazon, and the design is really pretty. It came with 3 different sheets, and honestly I love the print on all of them. I've actually never used this rub-on transfer before, so this is my first time trying it out, and I'm hoping all goes well. Right now I'm just trying to decide which one to cut out, and honestly that might be the hardest part. They're all so pretty and I kind of want to use them all. Now I'm going to apply the transfer above where I just placed a palette, so not the whole board, just that top section, and I'm keeping that in mind as I choose the design. I really like this section here with the bird and the flower, so I carefully cut that out. Next I just flip the transfer over, peel off the white backing paper, and place it down right where I want it to go. Then I just use that little stick it came with to rub the design onto the board. I start by rubbing over the whole image first to help hold it in place. Then I carefully lift one corner and slowly peel it back. If a part doesn't transfer right away, I just lay it back down and then I just keep rubbing over it until it does. Now there was a little spot that no matter how much I tried, I just could not get it to transfer. I don't know if it was the board or the transfer itself, but in the end it was fine, so it did blend. And so I'm just tapping along the edges, making sure it's fully down and everything stuck in place. Now you'll want to seal it, and you can use any water-based sealer like Mod Podge just to help protect the transfer and keep it from peeling over time. Next I'm going to paint the wood palette in the shade Seaside Blue from Deco Art, but really you can use any color you like. Just about anything will complement the wood beautifully. These Dollar Tree foam brushes aren't the sturdiest. They bend pretty easily when you apply pressure, so it can be a little tricky, but they do the job. So I'm painting the front of the palette, but then I remembered that I actually wanted to use the back as the front, and so I flipped it over and painted that side as well. I just like how this side looked better with the 2 vertical wood pieces. It adds a nice detail. I'm also going to be elevating it slightly with some tower blocks underneath, so having a flat surface on the back will just make it easier to glue. To lift up the palette, I'm using 6 tower blocks, and I'm gluing them together end to end in pairs, so I'll have 3 sets total. You could also use square dowels or any small wood pieces you have on hand, just something to give it a little height. And I'm just brushing on some of that blue paint. Now I will be adding glue on the narrower sides of the blocks, so those sides I want to keep unpainted. I also lightly sanded the part of the palette where I painted and I plan to add glue to. You know, it's always better to glue directly onto bare wood for a stronger hold. And then I'm just gluing the blocks on the palette like a U. And I'm gluing the vertical ones behind the ones in front to conceal it. I wanted to distress the palette a bit, just lightly, so I'm going in with my little finger sander and I'm sanding down the edges here and there. I'm also hitting a few spots on the surface just to rough it up a bit and give it more texture. Although I kind of wish I'd stain the palette a bit darker first, just so the distressing would stand out more, especially against this beautiful blue. I'm just adding some glue to the back of the palette. I really like using this glue from Type On. It holds really well. You can definitely use hot glue too, especially if you're not planning to put anything too heavy inside. To hang this up, I've just been loving these Command Velcro strips, and I love that they're removable. You're not left with holes on your wall. Now this stuff usually sticks to anything, but for whatever reason, it would just not hold well on this board, so just give the wood a good cleaning or even a quick sanding on that spot, or you can do what I did and add a strip of hot glue and that'll help stick it better. And we're all done. I really love that little pocket space where I can tuck in some greenery or faux flowers. It's such an easy way to add something pretty to the wall without taking up much space. I'll be using 3 of these thick rectangular wood blocks from Dollar Tree to make an adorable little wooden book stack. I really love how thick and sturdy these blocks are. I'll be stacking them on top of each other, and here I'm just making sure I have the side of the blocks that I like, and so I'm just checking out all the sides to see which one looks best. I'm going to be painting the blocks different colors, so I picked some light pastel shades that give off those spring vibes. For the first block, I'll be painting this really pretty lilac paint from Folk Art. This is actually a paint and sealer in one, which is perfect because this is going to be on the top of the stack and it will just give it that extra protection. I'm using a sponge brush and it just goes on so beautifully. I'm going to be painting the top surface and the sides, leaving the bottom unpainted since I'll be applying glue there. I did about 2 coats for a nice even coverage. Once that's done, I set it aside to dry because in a bit, I'll be applying a decorative stencil to give it some pretty detail. For the second block, I'll be painting it white using Waverly's white chalk paint. Since this block is going to be in the center of the stack, I'm just focusing on painting the sides. So this one was super quick to do. I'll be Mod Podging a decorative napkin over it, but before I get to that, I'm going to paint the final bottom block in moss green from Waverly. This shade is so beautiful. It's a rich, earthy, rustic green. It's so pretty. And since this is going to be the bottom block, I figured I'd go ahead and paint the bottom side too, just to finish it off nicely. I'm not planning to add any wording, so now I have the option to flip it over and make it the top. Now that the paint has completely dried, I'm ready to add some fun details to them. For the lilac block, I'll be adding an antique looking metallic sticker on the side. It has some really nice detailing and I get these at Dollar Tree. I use them often and I happen to have one that was narrow enough to fit perfectly on the side. I just stick it on, but for extra security, you can always add a little glue underneath. I'm painting right over it with the same lilac paint, but honestly, this wasn't really part of my original plan. Otherwise, I would have attached the sticker first and then painted the whole block. But you know, you can always leave it unpainted, or you could also paint it white before attaching the sticker. I think that contrast would have looked really nice too. On the top of the block, I'll be adding some stenciling. This is a 3-pack stencil set from Walmart, and I'll be using the leaf design. I'm using white chalk paint for this, and so I taped the stencil down securely. I dip my brush in the paint and remove any excess on a paper towel, and then I stipple lightly over the stencil, applying the paint in thin layers to avoid any bleeding underneath. It's important to build up the color gradually, adding just a little paint at a time. Now I'm not going for a solid heavy look with the stencil. I want the design to feel softer and more subtle, so I'm applying the paint lightly in some areas for a more delicate finish. So far, I'm so happy with how this one's looking. I love all the details. For the green block, I'm using another stencil from a Walmart pack. I'm going with the white chalk paint again for this one. Walmart does have some really nice stencils at a great price, and I love how this turned out too. It has that vintage old storybook vibe. For the middle one, I'm going to Mod Podge this pretty floral napkin on it. I got it at Michael's, and I just love the soft pastel colors. I think it'll complement the other 2 blocks perfectly. So the first step is to carefully separate the layers of the napkin. I only need the top layer since that's where the design is. Once I have that, I'm cutting out the part of the napkin I want to use. Next, I'm applying a generous amount of Mod Podge to the narrow side of the wood where I want the napkin to go. I'm also spreading a bit onto the edge of the wider side to help the napkin tuck in smoothly and create a cleaner finish once it's applied. Now I'll be using the iron-on method to attach the napkin. So once the Mod Podge is completely dry, I place the napkin on top of the wood where I've applied the glue. To protect the napkin, I'm placing a piece of parchment paper over that. The heat reactivates the glue and that helps to bond the napkin to the wood. Then I'm just carefully running my mini heat press, you can also use an iron, over the parchment paper. And in the end, you get a really smooth, seamless finish with no wrinkles or bubbles. And after that, I just sand off the overhang. And finally, I glue everything together. I'm using wood glue for a strong, secure hold with a bit of hot glue here and there just to give it that quick grip while it sets. So I just stack the wood blocks on top of each other, making sure they're lined up just right. You can leave it as is. You can also embellish with some ribbon or jute string. I love how this turned out. Each block is so unique, and I think that's what makes it even better. I love that they all don't match perfectly, and it gives it such a charming, eclectic feel. For this DIY, I'll be using several of these greenery bushes from Dollar Tree. I'll use about 3 for this project. I really love how they look, and I think they're definitely some of the more realistic looking ones. I'll also be using one of Dollar Tree's large woven baskets. I thought this size was perfect, but you can definitely use any basket or tray you have on hand. For the first look, I'll be using some battery-operated pillar candles. I got the 2 larger ones at Walmart a while back, and I wish I picked up a smaller one to create a trio for this project, but since I don't have one, I'll be using Dollar Tree's small white pillar candles instead. And I'm placing the 3 pillar candles in the center of the basket. I'll be placing the greenery bush around the candles, and I'm just bending the greenery to follow the shape of the basket. So I'm just laying these down, and I'm using 3 for this, but if you want a fuller look, you can definitely add 1 or 2 more. The greenery already has a nice full look on its own, so 3 felt just right for me. Next, I wanted to add some of these white flowers from Dollar Tree to the greenery. I thought I would just pull off a few and scatter them all around to add a little extra fullness and texture. It's such a simple step, but it really makes the whole arrangement come together nicely. You can totally make this as colorful as you want. I'm keeping it simple with the white flowers for a soft, neutral look, but this would also be gorgeous with some pinks and purples, or even little yellow flowers for a bright, cheerful pop. Another way you can style this is by placing the candles inside some cylinder vases, which just adds a beautiful touch. I'm using 3 vases from Dollar Tree in different heights to add some variation. Now, I started with my original 3 candles in the vases, but a couple of them ended up being too big, so I decided to switch to 3 smaller pillar candles that I got at Dollar Tree. I'm adding white rocks to the vases first. Since the vases are different heights, I want to adjust the candles so they're not all the same level. And these white rocks are from Dollar Tree, but you can also use Epsom salt or some shells or even wooden beads. I think any of those would work perfectly. And so now I just place the candles in the vases and I set them in the center of the basket. I love how simple yet elegant this looks. It really came together nicely. I grabbed this decorative chalkboard gold frame from Dollar Tree. It's honestly so pretty. I love the ornate, vintage inspired look, and the intricate detailing really makes it look way more expensive, even though it's just plastic. I'll also be using one of Dollar Tree's classic glass taper candle holders for this project. I'm turning these 2 simple items into a charming frame pedestal by propping the frame right on top of the candle holder. I'm going to paint the frame using this chalk paint from Craftsmart in the shade khaki. It's a beautiful soft natural beige tone with hints of taupe. Before painting, I'm popping out the black chalkboard along with the backing board, and I'll put those back in later. Feel free to pick whatever paint color matches your style and decor. Any color you'll love would totally work. I'm using this round sponge brush to paint the frame, and initially I planned to paint the whole thing solid, but as I brushed over it lightly, the paint only caught the raised parts of the design, and it actually ended up looking really pretty. It created this really nice contrast with the gold and made all the details stand out even more. So I just decided to go with that. I did leave the inner and outer sides unpainted, and I just like the way that looked. I'm painting the candle holder that same shade. Now, just a few tips on painting glass. You want to make sure it's completely clean first. I did give it a quick wash and wiped it down with some rubbing alcohol to make sure there wasn't any residue. You can also give it a light sanding with a fine grit sanding sheet to help the paint grip better. Okay, so I ended up going back and painting that inner and outer sides of the frame. The gold was just a little too bright, so I thought this looked much better. Once everything was dry, I set the frame on top just to get an idea of how it would look, but I wasn't really loving that open space underneath. It just looked a little unfinished to me. So I'm going to be using one of these round pieces from this Dollar Tree hanging sign to cover that area and give the frame something solid to rest on. So I just pulled one out, and I'm going to add some spackle to cover up those holes. On top of the frame, I'm going to glue one of these little wood pieces. These came in a pack from Dollar Tree. They were from their Christmas stuff a while back. They're actually little wooden angels, and these always come in handy for crafting, so I always grab a few packs whenever I spot them. I'm going to paint both of them to match, but on the little wood round, I'm just leaving a strip right in the center unpainted. That way the glue has something better to grab onto and it'll stick a lot stronger. For the strongest hold, you'll want to use something like E6000 and then add a little hot glue for an instant hold while it dries. So I glue the frame on top of the wood round and then I glue the little wood piece right on top. This turned out so beautiful and elegant. Now you can leave it just like that as a little decorative accent, or you can place a chalkboard back in. It's so pretty for a dessert table, or you can even add a nice photo or some artwork. For the next project, I'll be using 4 of these mini square wood pallets from Dollar Tree. I'm going to transform them into some beautiful coasters. I found these gorgeous napkins at Michael's and I thought they were just perfect for spring. The soft pastel colors are exactly what I was looking for and I think they'll look amazing on the wood. I'm going to Mod Podge the napkins onto the pallets using the iron-on method, which makes it super easy to get a smooth finish. So for the first palette, I'm brushing Mod Podge over the entire top, and I'm making sure to apply a nice even layer so the napkin sticks well. I thought it'd be fun to mix things up and give each one a unique design. So on another, I'm just applying Mod Podge on the 3 center slats, and another on the 2 outer ones. And on the last one, I just do every other. So that way each coaster has its own look, but they still feel like a set. And then I just let that Mod Podge dry completely. Before I iron on the napkin, I make sure to separate the layers since it's double ply. You only want to use a top printed layer for this, and so I just carefully peel them apart and then I cut the napkins to fit over the pallets. Now I'm using my mini heat press on a low setting, but you can also use a regular iron for this step too. To protect the napkin from direct heat, I place a sheet of parchment paper over it. And then I just gently press down and slowly move the heat press across the surface. The heat reactivates the dried Mod Podge underneath, causing the napkin to adhere perfectly to the wood. I love using the iron-on method because it gives such a smooth, clean, bubble-free finish without the risk of wrinkling or tearing the napkin, and it really helps the design look like it's part of the wood itself. Next, I'm sanding off the overhang to clean up the edges and make everything look nice. I'm using my mini sander for the outer edges, and for those hard to reach spots between the wood slats, I switched to a smaller sanding sheet. I carefully cut between these slats first so I can easily slide the sanding sheet right through. Wow, as I'm sanding, I'm really loving how it's turning out. I'm so glad I decided to mix things up where I place the napkins. It's actually quite satisfying seeing the different designs come together, and you know what, it's looking even better than I imagined. I wanted to have a little storage for the coasters, so I'm using this small wooden crate from Dollar Tree, and it's just the right size. I want to match it with the coasters, so I'm going to do the same thing, applying Mod Podge to the crate, and once that dries, ironing on the napkin to reactivate the Mod Podge, which will adhere the napkin in place. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay, so next is sanding, and I'm cutting slits between the gaps with a craft knife so I can get a sanding sheet right in between to remove the overhang. The final step is sealing the napkin in place. So I did apply a layer of Mod Podge right on top, and now that it's dry, I'm ironing over it to help flatten any bubbles that may have formed. And you really want to make sure to have a piece of parchment paper in between to protect the napkin, and you also don't want any of that glue getting on your iron. Now this part is optional, but since these are coasters and will be exposed to different temperatures, I decided to add an extra layer of protection by spraying on some spar urethane from Minwax. Especially if you're making these as gifts, that extra layer will just help protect the design and the wood from moisture and heat, so they'll stay looking nice longer. Alright, next I'm adding some cork to the bottom. I get these cork sheets at Dollar Tree and they're super convenient because they have a sticky back, which makes the whole process so much easier. I'm cutting a few strips from each coaster using a craft knife, sticking 2 strips on the outer edges of the bottom of each coaster, and this will help protect your surfaces from scratches and make sure the coasters don't slip around. Alright, so I thought I was done, but I wanted to take it a step further and make it look even nicer. The crate is a little longer than the pallets, so I wanted to close those gaps up a bit. I decided to trim some bamboo sticks to fit and cover up the gap. I glued them in place, and I really love how it turned out. It just gave everything a more finished, polished look and made the whole thing come together even better. For this project, I'll be using this 14-inch grapevine wreath. I get these at Michael's and they're quite inexpensive. I think this was just under $5. I'm going to fill it with some Dollar Tree flowers, keeping it pretty simple. I'm going with these white and purple shades, along with a few dainty flowers I pulled from a Dollar Tree bouquet. And I'm just going with these smaller ones to keep it light, natural, and airy. I love how delicate these flowers look. I want this bunch here to look more full, and I'll be using 4 of these on the wreath. I love the tiny white flowers, and I'm going to be attaching some colorful ones to the bunch. So to do that, I'm just pulling out some of the white flowers on top, and they just pop right out. And then I'm sliding in some of the colorful ones, like these pretty yellows and pinks, and I'm just pushing that down, and then I just place that white one back on top. I'm adding these gorgeous lavender stems from Dollar Tree and attaching them to the bunch. I do use quite a bit of these on each stem. Sometimes I'll even add 3 on a single stem. Now you can keep it as full or simple as you like, but either way, it gives off that natural wildflower vibe. You can even just pop them in a vase or in a white ceramic pitcher for a simple, beautiful arrangement. It's so pretty. Dollar Tree also has these beautiful rustic looking white leaf trays that I got recently, and it would also look so pretty placed on top with some candles. Okay, so back to the wreath. To attach, I'm first bending the bottom stem to match the natural curve of the wreath. And then I'm just tucking the flowers inside the grapevine, gently working them into place. Now you can always add extra reinforcements like hot glue or floral wire to make sure everything stays secure. But I'm just mostly letting the flowers naturally tuck into the wreath and just securing a few areas here and there. I only made 4 bunches for this wreath, so I spread them out as best as I could, but you can definitely add a few more for a fuller look. Now I'll be filling in any gaps and empty spaces to balance everything out. I'll also be adding a wooden sign right across, so I did make space for that. So 4 bunches was just enough for this one. For the wooden sign, I'll be using this wood plank from Dollar Tree. This one's 18 inches and I'll be trimming it to about 14 inches or so. For the wording, I have a couple options, both from Dollar Tree. There's this wooden home sign, and I love these. They come in a 2-pack. They're quite thick, and I do use them a lot. The other option was this welcome metal sign. I like the font and the length, so I decided to go with that one. I'll be painting the word white and staining the wood with antique wax. So I'm applying the antique wax with a damp cloth to keep it from going on too thick or too dark. Since the wreath is already a deep color, I want the wood to be a few shades lighter to create some contrast while adding some warmth. Before I paint the metal, I noticed that there were a couple of holes that I wanted to cover up, so I decided to just glue a couple of these metal thumbtacks, and these are also from Dollar Tree. Now I decided to snip off that nail part, but you don't have to. You can also just hammer that straight onto the wood as well. So I just glue them right over the holes and they blend in really nicely. You can leave it like this, but I'm going to paint this white. Now I was going to use acrylic paint, but I changed my mind and decided to take it outside and spray paint it instead. I thought I was completely out of the white spray paint, but thank goodness there was still a little left in the can. Next, I'm gluing it onto the wood, and I'm using Titebond multi-surface glue for a stronghold, along with a few dabs of hot glue to keep it all in place while it sets. And the final step is to attach everything in place. Once that's done, I go in and fill in any gaps or empty spaces that needs a little more fullness. I'm adding these purple flowers from Dollar Tree along with some leftover lavender to bring in more of that soft wildflower look. I love how this turned out. It has such a rustic, organic look, almost like it was gathered straight from a garden. And with that, this DIY is all finished. For this DIY, I'm using a couple of these small glass vases. One of them I grabbed from Dollar Tree, and the other one I've had for a while. The biggest thing I was looking for was making sure the opening at the top was the right size to fit a taper candle nice and snug. Not too loose, not too tight. I'll be using some chalk paint that I used earlier, khaki from Craftsmart. The Dollar Tree base had this jute string wrapped around, so I just removed that. Now before painting, you want to make sure your bases are nice and clean and free of any grease or residue. And so I just gave mine a quick wipe down with some rubbing alcohol on a cotton ball before I got started. I'll be using one of these round foam brushes. These are from Dollar Tree, but honestly, you can find them pretty much anywhere. And what I love about these brushes is that they really help the paint go on super opaque, nice and even. Look how quickly and easily it covers. I think I ended up doing a couple coats and it looked great. I also used my heat tool to speed up the drying time, just so I wasn't sitting around waiting forever. I love all the details on this vase. The texture and pattern on it is so pretty. It's got that diamond cut look with just a little vintage flair, and the paint really brings all of that out. Once the paint has dried, I'm going to go in and give the vase a light sanding. I'm just focusing on those raised areas. This helps bring out those details even more and gives it that slightly worn age look without going overboard. It adds a little bit of character and dimension, and honestly, it makes that pattern pop in such a subtle but pretty way. I'm not sanding it too much, but just enough to let a little bit of that base peek through and give it a little personality. Now I kind of wish I did one more just to have a set of 3, and you can totally mix and match colors too if you want to add a little variety. The final step is just dropping in some candles. Dollar Tree has these 6-inch battery operated ones, but I didn't realize they didn't come with batteries, so I can't really speak for how well they work, but long taper candles look great in these too, especially if you want a more classic look. I'm so happy with how this came together, and it was exactly the look I was going for. I'm making a wooden basket with a handle for this project, and I'll be using this Dollar Tree frame. I wanted to remove the whiteboard and I thought it would come right out, but it was really secured in place. Cutting out a small section will make it easier to loosen and wiggle that board free, but you will need something strong like a box cutter or a utility knife since the board is pretty sturdy. I'll be using a couple of these small wooden crates, and these are from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue them together side by side. Now I'm going to cover the shorter sides with a couple of giant craft sticks. I'll be using 2 for the front and 2 for the back. To measure, I simply hold the sticks up against the side of the box and mark the width. Then I trim the sticks down to fit. Once they're cut, I lightly sand the ends to smooth them out. For gluing, I flip the crates over so that the bottom is facing up. I want the craft sticks to be flushed with the top of the box. Then I apply glue to the sticks and press them into place. You could totally leave it like this. It looks great already, but I wanted to add a few embellishments to the wood. I'm going to use these puffy metallic stickers, which I got at Dollar Tree. I love using these for crafting. They add such a nice detail. Before I stick them onto the wood, I'm going to mix a couple of acrylic paint colors to get the shade that I want. But feel free to use any color you like. Light greens or blues or deep colors would work great too. I'm going to place the stickers on the wood because I'm going to paint over it. If you want, you can add a little glue to the back of the stickers like Titebond Quick and Thick glue, just to make sure they stay in place. Personally, I'm just going to stick them directly on, and I'm just trying to place the flower right in the center. I do also put one on the opposite side. After that, I brush over the paint, making sure to fully cover the metallic stickers. Now in order to fully cover the flower, you'll need a couple of coats. So once I get one coat down, I just use a heat tool to speed up the drying time, and then I apply another coat. Now another really pretty option is to paint the box first and then attach the flower on top if you want to preserve the vintage look of the stickers. So I paint all over the wooden boxes, including the inside, even though most of it will be covered later. Next, I'm just brushing some white paint all over the frame to give it a bit of a weathered look. I love that effect. And I also wanted to keep some of the frame peeking through underneath for some contrast. Once that's dry, I add some hot glue to the bottom of the frame like so. Then I place the crates on top. I just hold it in place until the glue sets. To keep it from wobbling, I'm gluing in some of these beads to the bottom. I'll be adding some flowers inside, so I grabbed a couple of Dollar Tree flower bouquets in pink and purple. I'm cutting some floral foam to fit inside the small crates. I thought I had it right, but I cut a little too short, so I had to trim a bit more to bring it closer to the height of the crates. And that will make it much easier to arrange the flowers. Okay, after that, I'm just trimming the flowers off the stems and arranging them in the basket, mixing the colors until I like the way it looks. I'm placing them all around but focusing more on one side. I'm also tucking in some greenery from Dollar Tree to fill in any empty spaces. You can just play around with the arrangement until you like the way it looks. You can keep it simple with some neutral greeneries or succulents, or even place some candles with a few flowers inside. Either way, you have a beautiful wooden basket to display it all in. For the next DIY, I'll be using another one of these Dollar Tree bamboo cutting boards. I'm making a pretty little tray with gold handles, and I wanted to use a rub-on transfer again for this. They're just so pretty. I'll have that Amazon link below if you want to check it out. So here, I'm just trying to decide which part of the design I like, whether I'm going to cover the whole surface or just a small part. And I decided to go with this section right here, and so I just carefully trim it out with an X-Acto knife. I'll be using a couple of these gold metal pools from Dollar Tree. They also had black ones too, which was such a nice find. Definitely one of those things I don't always see, so I grabbed a few while I could. So before I rub on the transfer, I just want to get an idea of placement with the pools. There's a pretty little bird there and I don't want to cover up its head. Now I thought it was a little too long, so I thought I'd cut out a line of the wording in the middle just so I can bring the two main designs a little closer and avoid the handle going over it. And I'm just trimming some of the writings around the flowers just so that it's not too boxy. And then I remove that white backing paper of the rub-on design and I place them down on the board with the design side facing up. I'm using the wooden stick that it came with to apply the transfer on the wood, and I start out going over the whole design, and this just helps getting it to stick initially, and so that way it doesn't move around. That was looking a bit uneven by the bird. There was this big empty spot on the top right, and so I just cut up some of that wording I had trimmed off earlier, and I stuck a few pieces to extend it. I thought that balanced it out a lot better. So I just keep rubbing over the design while slowly lifting it up. If any spots didn't transfer as I went, I would just lay it back down, rub over that area again, and then keep lifting until the whole design was fully transferred. Once the transfer is on, you can go over it with a layer of matte Mod Podge just to seal it in and keep it from peeling or scratching off later. Now, I would have loved to screw on the handles, but the screws that came with them are just too long for the cutting board. You could use shorter screws and add some adhesive bumpers underneath, but for this one, I'm just going to glue the handles on instead. I'm also going to elevate the tray with some square dowels that I trimmed down a fit, which I'll be placing underneath. I'm going to paint it just to add a little color and contrast. This is khaki chalk paint from Craftsmart. It's a very neutral color, but I could definitely see this looking great in bolder colors too. Once the paint has dried, I glue it right underneath about 1/4 inch from the edge. For the handle, I'll be using E6000 for a super strong hold. And I try to place that right above where I place the dowels. And this one is all done. Let me know what you think. I'll be using this blank rectangle MDF board from Dollar Tree. It kind of has that shiplap detail on the front. I'll also be using the 17-inch wood plank from Dollar Tree. Now I actually needed 2 for this project, but thank goodness I had a little piece left over from a past project, which was just the amount that I needed. I'm going to trim the wood plank in half, and I want 2 equal pieces without the holes. And so I just measure, mark, and then trim it. I use my miter box and saw to trim, but you can also use a utility knife and a metal ruler to score it until it breaks. For the base, I'll be using this Dollar Tree board, and I'm going to trim it to the exact length of the cut wood. And I want to make sure it's the exact size, or even a little under that, but I just don't want it to go over. I'm going to be making a rustic planter box that kind of looks like an old distressed drawer. For the wood plank, I start by adding some stain to it, and this is dark walnut from Varathane. I'm just applying one light coat over it, which covered the wood nicely. So after that, I just set it aside to dry. For the MDF board, I'm using Deco Art satin enamel in the shade Seaside Blue, which I thought would complement that stained wood nicely. This is such a beautiful color, and I want the paint to look a bit weathered, and so I'm just dry brushing that over the board, making sure to still let some of that wood underneath peek through. Now, I was going to leave the stain planks as is with the stain, but when I put it together to see what it would look like, it was nice, but it just kind of looked like a real drawer. And I wanted it to look like a weathered decorative drawer. So I decided to paint the stain plank seaside blue as well, but still letting some of that dark wood underneath peek through. So we shall see in a bit how it turns out. On the shiplap board, I'm going to add a vintage looking metal pole that I had. I drilled a couple of pilot holes so I could attach the drawer pulls. I marked where the holes needed to be so that it's centered and then drilled them. Once that was done, I attached the metal pole and screwed it into place. It's such a beautiful detail. To add the base, I'll be using 4 tumbling taro blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm applying some glue on the sides of the blocks, and then I'm applying them on the bottom corners, making sure it's flush on the bottom and side. And I'm attaching the blocks on both of the rectangle wood. The tower block will help hold up the base as well as connect the boards together. Now to assemble, I'm applying glue on the edges of the rectangle wood like so, as well as on the tower blocks, and I'm adding the glue on all 4 sides. Then I stand it up, and to keep it from falling over, I place a couple wood blocks behind them. From there, I place a base in the center, letting it rest on the tower blocks. And then I just push the sides together, and then I attach the front and the back. Now you can add more blocks in the bottom for more security. I did end up doing that, or even add some on the inside. And this one's all done. Now you can place whatever you want inside, some fresh flowers, greenery, or even a small succulent arrangement. Let me know what you would put inside. Alright, this DIY is a super quick one. I grabbed 3 of Dollar Tree's black pillar candle pedestals for this. They always have a bunch of different styles. You'll probably see some white ones too, so just grab whatever 3 you like best, as long as the 3 match. I'm also going to be using a couple of these dark votive candle holders. I just really love the look of these. For the pedestals, I'm gluing 2 of them together to make one long one. I'm just lining up the bottoms, adding some glue, and sticking them together. Super easy. And then I'm placing the glass candle holder on top. You can either permanently glue them in place with E6000 or just add a little hot glue so you can mix and match and pop it out whenever you want to change it up. And because Dollar Tree has a big variety of votive candle holders, there's so many different ways you can switch them up for a few dollars. I'll be using 1 of Dollar Tree's cutting board. I'll also be using 8 of these paint stir sticks, which I got at my local hardware store, Lowe's. They were about $1.98 for a pack of 10. I'll be making a chic bamboo box, and these are going to make the sides with 2 on each side. And so I'm just laying them on top so I can see how much I need to trim. I want the length to be a little shorter because I want the bamboo board to extend past the edges. I'll just be using my miter box and saw to trim them down. I'm cutting 4 pieces to 9 inches and another 4 to 6 inches. Since I'm making multiples of the same size, I'm just taping them together, and it makes the cutting process go a lot faster, and it keeps everything nice and even. To hold the paint sticks upright, I'm using these square dowels trimmed to about 2 3/4 inches. These are actually from some Dollar Tree canvas frame that I had left over from a past project, and they ended up being perfect for this, and they were already dry brushed with white paint. So here they are, all trimmed and ready to go. So the paint stir sticks have those little white ruler marks on them, and I did try lightly sanding some of it off, or at least just to tone it down a bit. But you know, I wasn't too worried about it since I knew I would be dry brushing some white paint over them anyway. I'm using white chalk paint from Waverly, and I'm just lightly brushing it over the paint sticks. I want it to have a weathered, distressed look, and so I'm just dry brushing it to let some of that wood still peek through. That way I get that worn out vibe without having to sand anything later. I'm starting with the longer pieces first, just brushing along the grain with a light hand. I'm not fully coating them, I just want that soft, brushed on texture that gives it a bit of character. I like when the paint goes on a little uneven, it adds some depth and it keeps it from looking too flat or uniform. I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick to glue the wood together, but you can use any wood glue or even something strong like E6000 or super glue. I wouldn't really recommend hot glue for this part. It might hold at first, but over time, it doesn't have that same staying power, especially if you're planning to keep this piece for a while. So I'm starting with the longer wood pieces and adding some glue to each end, and then pressing them onto the square dowels, one on each side. I'm making 2 sets of these, each with 2 paint sticks spaced out evenly. Next, once that's dried a bit, I'm going to build the shorter sides. I'm using 2 paint sticks here as well, spacing them the same way as I did the longer sides. I'm just applying glue on the ends and lining them up between the 2 long sides, one at the top and one on the bottom. Then I clamp everything in place to hold it steady while the glue dries. Once all the sides are attached and everything feels secure, I'm gluing the whole crate onto the bamboo cutting board, which will make the base. And we are all done. This came together so easily, and I love how clean and simple it looks. For the next decor DIY, I'm using this square piece of wood from Dollar Tree. It has a raised 3D design on the front, but I'm actually going to use the back instead. I want to add some stenciling to the wood to create a light background design. I got this stencil set on Amazon and it came in a pack of 6. I'll be using one of them for this project. Now it was a bit thin and I actually thought it was going to be a little bigger, but it still worked out well. They're very pretty designs. I'll be using white chalk paint, and I decided to leave the wood as is instead of painting it. I could have added a bit more contrast by either painting the wood or using a different stencil color, but I really wanted the design to be subtle in the background. I didn't want it to stand out too much since I'm going to be placing a wreath on top. So I'm starting in the center and I tape the stencil down to keep it from shifting while I work. I lightly load my brush with paint, making sure to dab off any excess so it doesn't bleed under the stencil. Then using a soft dabbing motion, I start applying the paint over the design, gradually building it up. Okay, once I finish the section in the middle, I shift the stencil over to the left. I line it up to connect the design, and then I just continue stenciling. And I keep going until the whole wood square is covered, and honestly this was super easy to do. The design is super light, maybe a little hard to see with my lighting, but I'm really loving how it's coming along. On top of the wood square, I'll be placing this Dollar Tree frame, and it was just the perfect size. So I'm just turning it over and removing the backing board. And then I'm just pulling out with my pliers all the metal tabs, and those pop right out so easily. To attach to the wood, I started by applying hot glue all over the frame. I really thought that would be enough to hold it, but I was wrong. The frame isn't real wood, or maybe I was too slow and the glue dried too quickly, but either way, it popped off. So I switched to using Tite Bond Quick and Thick glue with some hot glue here and there for that instant bond. Then I clamped it all around and gave it some time to dry, and yeah, that worked much better. I'll be adding a cute little wreath on top using this gold metal hoop. I'm decorating it with some beautiful flowers I pulled from a Dollar Tree bouquet, keeping it soft and simple. So I'm going to be gluing a couple of these leaves together, making sure they're going in opposite directions. I'm just adding the glue to the stems, making sure there's a little space in the center, and I'll make 2 of these. Before I start gluing the flowers onto the hoop, I noticed it was looking a little brassy and faded in some areas, so I'm just going to use some Rub and Buff wax to give it a bit of a refresh. I'm using a piece of cloth to apply that on the hoop, so now that's looking much better. I thought I'd add these little pink fuchsia colored flowers behind the leaves. They're so pretty and dainty, and I'm just going to add them to one of the glued leaves. And then I'm wrapping some jute string around the center, and this will make it easier to glue some flowers in the middle, and it also cleans it up. And from there, I'm wrapping it around the metal hoop to attach it and hold it in place. I'm also securing it in with more hot glue. Next, I'm going to add a couple of flowers in the center. I love these flowers. They're very simple, but they really complete the look, and they just tie everything together. For the next set of glued leaves, I'm just gluing them directly onto the hoop, then wrapping some jute string around the center. This one isn't going to be as full as the one on the bottom, but it's going to complement it and help balance out the wreath. I'm just placing one flower in the center, and then I'm adding some baby's breath around the flower to add more texture and fill in the empty spaces. I'll be using some wooden letters from Michael's and Dollar Tree to spell out Hello Spring, and I'll be placing them on top of a couple giant popsicle sticks, and I just trimmed off the ends a bit so it's flat and not curved. I'll be using the word hello from this wooden word pack from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be giving the words a coat of white paint. For the craft sticks, I'm staining them with some Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm applying it with a damp cloth so that it goes on smoothly and it gives it a nice even finish. To glue together, I'm just adding some glue on this small craft stick, and I'm placing that right in the center like so. And I did also add a couple more going vertically on the ends. Next, I'm gluing the letters down using some wood glue to attach them, and I'm just spacing it out before gluing. I really like how the words have different fonts. It just makes it look even better. I decided to add some jute string on the areas of the hoop where I'm going to add glue. So I'm just wrapping about 1 inch in length on both sides. And then I apply some hot glue on top of the string, and then I placed a wooden sign right on top of that. Then I add some more glue on the back of the wrapped jute string, and then I glue that onto the wood board. I added a few more flowers in some areas. I thought it needed a few more. You can add a string hanger on the back or just lean it against the wall. I'll be using 3 of Dollar Tree's 6-inch palettes and 2 of the square ones. I'm going to stain them with this water-based stain from Varathane in the shade Dark Walnut. But you can definitely stain or paint them whatever color you prefer. Now this stain goes on really smoothly with a brush, and it's super easy to work with. And since it has poly in it, it also seals it, which makes it even more durable. I'm also using a smaller brush to get into those hard to reach areas, like in between the slats and inside these square palettes, to make sure I cover every little area. I'll be adding some stenciling on one of the rectangle palettes. I got this really adorable floral stencil sheet at Walmart, and I'll be stenciling in a floral design on the wood. So I'm just positioning that in place and then taping it down. I'll be using white chalk paint from Waverly. I start by adding a small amount of paint to my brush, then carefully dabbing off the excess to avoid any bleeding under the stencil. It's always best to apply the paint in light, even layers, and this will just help build up the color gradually, giving you more control and a cleaner finish. So here's how it looks. I really love the details. It just adds that really nice touch. Now I'm going to start assembling the palettes to form a box or a little crate. So I begin by applying wood glue to the ends of one of the rectangular palettes. Then I attach the square palettes to each side, pressing them firmly into place and double checking that everything lines up. Next, I grab another rectangle palette, add glue to the ends, and repeat the process, attaching it to the sides of the square palettes. I make sure everything is snug and secure, and I also use some tape to clamp and hold everything in place while the glue sets. Finally, I add glue along the bottom edges, and I attach that to the last palette, which will be the base, pressing it down carefully to make sure it's fully attached. And that's it. It comes together so easily, but the end result is so beautiful. It makes a perfect little rustic box that you can use organizing small items or even a centerpiece. I grabbed one of Dollar Tree's wooden wreath beads, and I got the stained one. I also got some greenery and flowers from Dollar Tree as well. I got these a while back. The colors are so pretty, and you have 2 different shades of pink, which is nice. So first, I start by bending the stems of the greenery to match the round shape of the wreath. I'm gently shaping and curving them so they blend in naturally. You can also trim them down a bit if you want, but I'm keeping them intact since it makes attaching them to the wreath much easier. To attach, I cut a piece of floral wire and I wind it around the stem of the greenery to secure it in place. For added stability, you can also wrap some wire higher up on the stem. And then I place another greenery stem, securing it in place. This time going the opposite direction and also making sure I have some space in between for some flowers. Now for the flowers, I'll be gluing 3 of them in the center with a darker pink in the middle and the lighter pink ones on each side. That's all I'm doing for this one, but you can definitely add more flowers if you'd like, or even a small wooden sign across the middle. But personally, I love the simplicity of this one. I attached some ribbon to hang the wreath, and this one's done. For the next project, once again, I'll be using one of Dollar Tree's bamboo cutting boards. I'll be adding some stenciling right on top, and I'll be using this one from Walmart. I've used this several times and I really like it. I'll just be using white chalk paint for the stencil. I did consider painting the whole board white and doing a dark blue for the design part, but you know, I love the look of the bamboo wood too much to cover it up. But let me know, would you paint the board or leave it as is? Now, since the stencil was a bit bigger than the board, I added some double-sided tape underneath to hold it in place. Then I just apply the paint over the stencil using a pouncing motion. I apply the paint in light layers, that way the paint doesn't bleed under the edges. Okay, so I was planning to stick this white floating shelf from Dollar Tree towards the bottom of the board, but I totally forgot I wanted the board to stand up horizontally. To me, it looked a little off vertically since the shelf was so wide, so I decided to scrap that plan, save it for the next project, and do something else with the board. I decided to make this into another hanging wall pocket, but this time with fabric. I got this blue and white striped fabric from Dollar Tree and I thought it would complement the white stencil nicely. I'm just going to hot glue the fabric on the back of the board. So first I trim out the amount that I need, making sure I have at least 1.5 inches of extra fabric all the way around to fold around the back. On one of the longer sides, I glued down about 1/2 inch of the fabric first, just to tuck in that raw edge so that it doesn't fray and it looks a lot neater. Then I place the board face down on top of the fabric and I glue the sides in place, pulling it snug as I go. Now you can definitely double up the fabric. I didn't have enough to do so for this one, but that would have made it extra sturdy. For the corners at the bottom, I just do a little triangle fold and then I glue them down. And if you want an even more secure hold, you can also use a staple gun to finish it off. To hang it, I'm going to drill a couple of small holes near the top. You can thread through some pretty ribbon, twine, or jute string, whatever fits your style, and tie it in a knot or a bow to hang it up. It adds a cute little finishing touch and it makes it really easy to display on a hook or a wall. Okay, for this one, I'll be using one of Dollar Tree's bamboo cutting boards. Along with that floating shelf from the earlier DIY, the shelf is a white plastic floating shelf, about 8.5 by 4 inches. It's super lightweight and it has those little keyhole slots on the back for hanging, which I won't be using for this project. So I'll be gluing the shelf onto the cutting board, making sure it's attached along the longer bottom side. There are a couple of little tabs sticking out from the back of the shelf, and so I just snip those off with some pliers. I just want that edge to be nice and flush so it sits flat when I glue it on the board. Now I was planning to add some stenciling on the board, but as I was just kind of holding in the pieces together to get a feel for it, I actually really liked how it was looking already. It's very clean and simple, and sometimes that's all you need. You could even make a couple of these and switch out the screws with some longer ones so that you can attach them on the wall. That's definitely an option. Okay, so moving on. Now because I really like that minimal subdued look, instead of stenciling a full design on the board, which I'd originally planned, I thought I would just circle back to those pretty rub-on transfers and just add a small design on the corner. I think that'll add such a pretty touch. And so I just cut out this corner flower and I thought it would look perfect on the top corner. So I removed the backing paper, placed the transfer on the left side of the board, and then I rub it on using that little wooden stick that it came with. And just keep going until the whole thing transfers cleanly. Next, I'm going to add some glue on the back of the shelf, and I'm using E6000 for a strong bond, but you can definitely use your glue of choice. And I just attach the shelf and board together like so. Then I wrap some tape around it to clamp them together and hold everything tightly in place while the glue sets. To finish it off, I thought I'd paint the edge of the shelf just to give it a little more detail. It was kind of looking a bit flat as is, and so I just made sure to tape off the areas around it that I didn't want to get any paint on, just to keep everything clean. I'm using a very light neutral color, and I actually mixed a couple shades together until I got the shade that I liked. And this DIY is all done. For the final DIY, I'll be using 3 of these glass taper candle holders from Dollar Tree. I really love the shape of these. They have such a simple, clean look to them. I'm also using a couple of these decorative plastic bowls. There's some nice details on it, and these came in a pack of 4 from Dollar Tree. I'm going to paint the candlesticks white. I'll be using Waverly's white chalk paint. For the bowls, I'm spray painting them gold. I like using Rust-Oleum's gold metallic spray paint because it bonds really well to plastic, which is perfect for this. So I just took everything outside and gave the bowls a good coat of spray paint, making sure to cover both the inside and the outside. Okay, while that's drying, I'm going to work on the candle holders. After giving them a good cleaning with some rubbing alcohol, I'm gluing the ends of the two of the candle holders together, and I'm using a combination of hot glue and E6000. Once that's dry, I'm going to go ahead and paint them. I decided to mix in a little bit of that khaki chalk paint with the white just to tone it down a bit. I didn't want it to be super bright white, and I wanted it to have more of a softer, warmer look. I'm using a round foam brush to paint, and I really like these because they help the paint go on more opaque a lot faster. I'm also pouncing the brush as I go, which helps the paint grab onto the surface better and even adds a little bit of texture, which I really like for a piece like this. Or you don't have to paint it at all and just leave it clear. Now, all of these DIYs today are really quick to do, but let me know in the comments below if you like quick DIYs or bigger projects that take a little more time. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, next I'm going to glue the bowls on top of the candle holders. I'm using a mix of E6000 and hot glue again. And this DIY is done. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of my new upcoming videos. Until next time, bye!